Hello, Professor BRB here, and today we're going to take a detailed look at the Swatches panel, which is certainly one of the panels we most interact with in Adobe Illustrator. When we open the Swatches panel, we see our swatches in what is called the small thumbnail view. And if we can, of course, also view them as large thumbnails if we want to get a better sense of what the colors look like on the screen. And we can view them as a list, which gives us quite a bit more information. And you can see, looking at this list, that I have a little icon next to each swatch indicating that these swatches are in CMYK. If I change my document color mode to RGB, which is the correct color mode for web, video, or devices, you will see that my swatch all convert to RGB. And if I convert back to CMYK, they convert to CMYK, which is the correct mode for any project printed on a hard surface, such as paper. If I go into my color panel and eyedropper or otherwise choose a color, any color that is in my fill box here, I can make a swatch of by either clicking on this little new swatch button here or by going to the panel menu. And this gives me a lot of options here. I can drag my sliders around to edit the color. And I can also make the color global. And if I make the color global, that's very similar to being a spot color. What it means is that wherever that color appears in the document, if I edit the swatch, it will edit the color. For example, I'm going to make a couple of stars here, and my vase and my stars are filled with that global color. I'm now going to deselect them. And if you can see, this little triangle in the swatch indicates that it's a global color, plus this dot here, this square that has just appeared. If I double click on this and I edit the color, make it into a yellow, for example, and of course I can name it. It can be named with the values, or I can call it yellowish. And notice that even though my shapes here were not selected, because I created this as a global swatch, they were still affected. That is very similar to changing your swatch to a spot color. And that gives me a little spot icon here, and that has the same effect. So as we look at this, we're going to quickly realize that just the default swatches are very limited, and we're going to need to have access to a lot more colors in order to complete our artwork in the way that we want to. And when we go to this little icon at the bottom of our swatch palette, we see the Swatch Libraries menu. And this is a really great resource, and new things are being added to it all the time. So if you have worked in previous versions of Illustrator, don't forget to kind of look around in here and see what you can find. For example, in the pattern swatches, I noticed recently that some new patterns have been added called Vonster patterns, by one of my favorite vector artists, Von Glitzka. And Von Glitzka is tremendously talented. He's written some books on drawing with vectors, and his patterns are really beautiful. And I will put in the show notes, let me go back to my layers here for a moment and turn that layer off. Here is a picture of one of his books, and I highly recommend this book. I've looked at a lot of books on Adobe Illustrator, and I really think this is one of the very best. I will put a link to his website where you can download a free chapter from this book in the comments on this video. Looking further in the other libraries resources we have here, there is a wonderful collection of gradients. One of my favorites is the simple radial gradients, which are quite nice to work with. But there are plenty of other ones. If we go to gradients here, for example, there are spectrums, which would take quite a while to construct on your own. And of course, all of these are editable, so you're not limited to exactly the way that they are. And you can just get a lot of great ideas. We've got one here based on color harmonies, gems and jewels. Really nice. And one of my very favorites in the gradients palette is metals. And these are just great metal gradients, and they quite accurately imitate the appearance of metal. Let me turn this layer off for a moment and turn on this layer. This is an illustration I recently did for the Noun Project, which is an interesting website, of a Spitfire. I did this for a friend who admires this particular piece of engineering. And you can see that I can instantly convert my Spitfire into all kinds of different metals. And it's very interesting to work with this. And you can get a lot done very quickly, I think. And as you look back at my swatches palette, you'll notice that every swatch that I have clicked on has gone into my swatches palette. Looking further, color books. This is very useful for many professional projects. And what all of these different libraries listed in the color books are representations of inks, printer's inks, that have been created by various companies. In the United States, Pantone is the most frequently used. I believe in Asia, Toyo is more used, and in other parts of the world, True Match and Focal Tone are used. But I'm going to concentrate on Pantone because those are the ones I'm most familiar with. The Pantone CMYK libraries are quite extensive, and you can see when I open this up, it's a huge number of colors. And if I go to my list view here, you can see that these colors are all named with numbers. And these numbers correspond to colors in Pantone's printed swatch books. And let me show you what I mean by that. I'm going to turn this layer off and turn this layer on. And this is a picture of a Pantone printed swatch book. And every graphic designer who works for print eventually gets one of these or a set of them. And they can compare the number that appears in the Pantone book with the number in the swatch library and determine exactly, precisely how a color is going to look when it's printed. And this is a very valuable capability because colors as they appear on the screen and colors as they appear on a printed object often are quite different. So the Pantone colors are of great use to us. If I go back to look at other Pantone color books in color books here, they also have solid, both for coated, which is shiny paper, or uncoated, which is matte paper. Let's look at the coated library here. And I'm going to click on, maybe I'm going to select a range of pinks here and just pull those in to my swatches palette where they're going to live for a minute. And you can see if I go to my list view that those colors appear marked by their Pantone number, and that they have both a spot indication and a special little indication here showing me that these are not ordinary CMY color K colors, but they are Pantone spot colors. What that means is when they go to press, the printer has to actually do a separate press run to ensure that this color is precise. So these are above and beyond CMYK colors, and you would use them in a condition where absolutely precision rendering of a color is important, because obviously it's more expensive to create a separate press run. You can easily create color groups so that your colors will be grouped in folders by simply selecting a range of colors and then just clicking this little folder icon, creating a new color group. And I can name it. I'll call this one Pantone Reds. Click OK. And now that creates a color group, which is great because when you have color groups, you can use those in the very useful Edit Colors panel, which we covered in the last lesson. One thing I will note about color groups is that they are color groups, not swatch groups. And if you attempt to create a group of gradients, you'll get this little error message that says color groups cannot contain pattern or gradient swatches. Okay, they can only contain flat colors. Sometimes it's useful to clear out the colors that you're not going to be using in a project. And you can just do that by selecting them and deleting them. Yes, delete them. I never recommend deleting the 4 basic swatches, which are none, registration, black, and white. A lot of people wonder what registration is because it looks like black. And on screen, if you fill something with registration and you fill something with black, they look exactly the same, but they are not the same. Registration is for crop marks only, and what it does when you send something to the printer is that it will print all of the CMYK colors that it will print in cyan, in yellow, in magenta, and in black. So even though they look the same on the screen, don't use registration unless you absolutely are sure that you want your piece to print in CMY and K. In closing, I should mention that you can import the swatches from any other Adobe Illustrator document by simply going to Other Library and navigating to that document and choosing it, and the swatches palette will open. You should also know that Adobe has created a special format for swatch libraries called ASE, which means Adobe Swatch Exchange. And ASE swatches can be shared between Illustrator, Photoshop, and InDesign.